Company of America, Incorporated, and Perry Homes of Houston.
Live from Austin, this is the Governor's Report with Texas Governor Bill Clements. Tonight, the governor will be questioned by reporters in the studio and by citizens watching and listening across the state. Now, here is moderator Joel Fowler.
Good evening and welcome to the November edition of the Governor's Report. In the wake of the November 4th election, the Texas Senate will convene with 3 fewer killer bees, and on the House side, 12 new Republicans join that chamber. Proposed bills are already pouring into the Chief Clerk's office for consideration in the upcoming legislative session. Among them, aid to school districts hardest hit by federal court rulings requiring free education to children of undocumented workers. A 33.5% teacher pay raise bill, a proposal to make narcotics paraphernalia illegal, a proposal to fund factories to make fuel from renewable resources, and over 100 more so far. In January, the legislature will undertake its statutory duty to draw up a redistricting plan for the state, a process which promises to pit computer against computer in a struggle for power in the state's voting districts. And the Texas Offshore Port Consortium is proceeding with plans to build a facility to replace the CDOC project, which has been unable to stay afloat financially. Tonight, we'll take your questions for Governor Clements. Our telephone operators from the Austin chapter of the League of Women Voters are standing by for your calls a little bit later in tonight's program. First, let's turn to our reporters who are going to begin the questioning. Tonight, Roberta Hammond from KERA in Dallas, Susan Wright from KUHT in Houston, and Dave McNeely from the Austin American-Statesman will question the governor. Welcome to you all. We'll begin tonight's questioning with Dave McNeely. Dave?
Governor, you just come back from some meetings with some of the high Republican officials. You're going to Washington tomorrow to meet with Governor and President-elect Ronald Reagan. I'm curious, does John Tower want to be Defense Secretary, and is Ronald Reagan liable to appoint him? And if so, who would you appoint to take Tower's seat in the Senate?
Well, Dave, there certainly has been an enormous amount of speculation over this particular situation. To be responsive to your question, I think that that Senator Tower has certainly made his position clear that he would indeed like to be the Secretary of Defense. So that establishes one parameter of your question here. The second part would have to do with how the Reagan transition team and the Reagan advisors, and then, of course, ultimately, Governor Reagan himself looks upon this nomination, shall we say. I know that there are several people being considered for this particular position. Governor Reagan's transition team has established a procedure where Governor Reagan will be handed not less than 3 and not more than 5 on a so-called short list of options that he would have with respect to people for these top-level jobs. That applies not only to defense, but also to the other senior cabinet posts. Now, under those circumstances, no one is going to make this decision except Governor Reagan. It's his decision. In passing, I would say that certainly by John Tower being in the Senate for 16 years and serving on the Senate Armed Services Committee, where he will be the next chairman, he certainly has the experience and the qualifications that would make him eligible for this kind of a position. In my judgment, he would surpass the qualifications of some other predecessors as Secretaries of Defense.
But if he were named, who would you appoint to?
But on the other hand, talking about if he were named, that's purely speculative. That's the third part of your question. You asked 3 questions. And that's purely speculative, and I haven't even considered who might or might not be eligible. I have been reading in the papers with great interest about the Democrats who might run for this speculative situation. But as far as I'm concerned, I haven't even thought about it because I don't know that it's going to happen in the first instance. And I think that the people of Texas might be tired of elections at this point. I know that I am. I've just gone through a very strenuous election process, and I wouldn't look with great deal of enthusiasm about starting another election process in the state of Texas. So let's just wait and see what Governor Reagan does. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't have any idea.
Susan Wright?
Governor, on this program you've said before that Texas consumers can get rate relief and utility complaints at City Hall, and that they should look to their own local governments for criticism or blame or praise in the way the rates are set. But testimony has been continuing about the way the Public Utility Commission works, and today, if I can summarize some of the criticism that was given, they said it is actually a bastardized system the way it works now. The local politicians hear the rate requests, turn them down, reap the political benefit, knowing that they will be appealed here to Austin, and the Public Utility Commission will give the utilities almost, if not all, of what they want. Probably the key element of the proposals that these critics are advancing would be the election of the commissioners from single-member districts to make them more responsive. I wonder if you would support an elected Public Utility Commission.
No, I wouldn't.
Would you support returning all of the rate-making authority to the cities, as some of the critics have said?
I think that's an option that we should certainly consider, but on the other hand, I think that we do need to have a safety valve on those local bodies to where it would be considered at a higher level. I think that everyone would probably want that. I can accept from your statement, that at the present time, all of these appeals just seem to be automatically kicked up to the Public Utility Commission. So there may well be some need for perfecting legislation over what we now have. But I do think that we need a higher body here in Austin that would have an overview of the local authorities in this regard. But I can also accept that it may be abused at this point. I would remind you that there may be a change in the offing in this regard. Not too long ago, I think the Insurance Commission really surprised a whole lot of people with what they did with one of these applications wherein they were asking for much, much higher rates, and they were turned down. So there may be a new day dawning with respect to the Commission and its activities.
Another criticism that was raised is the fact that the Commission does not even spend the amount of money that is collected to fund the Commission from the utility bills, and it has absolutely no capacity to audit some of these giant utilities and to investigate complaints, and it takes years and years for even bad actors, allegedly General Telephone, for example, to even be explaining to the Commission why it can't provide service and why it leads the state in complaints.
I would not be surprised if we didn't need some changes made, because the Public Utility Commission in itself is a relatively new body, relatively speaking. And my observation has been that historically, these kinds of established agencies and or bodies or commissions, they do undergo change as time moves forward, and we learn by experience their inadequacies. So I wouldn't be surprised, and I wouldn't look with disfavor on some perfecting legislation during the coming session.
Roberta Hammond.
Governor, what about perfecting legislation on tax relief and reform? We have had tax relief and reform out of the 1979 session, which has caused something of a revolt in Dallas. And the Texas Municipal League predicts that such a revolt will happen throughout the state if some relief from these relief bills is not put forward. I want to give you one specific example. I know you're aware of it, that when agricultural land was allowed to be taxed on its productivity value as opposed to its market value, a lot of land speculators were able to avoid heavy taxation. Now, that was not intended for that purpose. The relief was intended for small farmers, for example. Would you support some kind of legislation which would bring land, which would eventually hit the market, up to its value as market value as opposed to productivity?
Well, I'm sure that you appreciate that you're in an area that is about as complicated as any area that we have in the entire state with respect to taxation on real property. I would remind you that this state has been trying to come to an equitable solution to this problem all during my lifetime, and I suspect even before that. So what the legislature tried to do in the last session, and I have to admit that I looked with favor upon it, was to come to a more equitable situation where all property within a certain county, in this instance, was assessed on the same basis, where it was equitable for all taxpayers, and any one taxpayer could take his property and compare it with another taxpayer, and the base was fair and equitable, which has not been the case before. It is certainly, again, no surprise to me that this piece of legislation has caused problems. Anything as complex as this issue and as far-reaching as this issue inevitably will cause problems of this nature. So I will predict to you that there will be perfecting legislation with respect to the so-called pivotal bill, which is what you're talking about. But I would also remind you that a lot of the problems that have occurred with respect to this bill, in particular Dallas County, where you're from, and where I happen to have been born and raised, are not all the product of the legislation. And some of the problems that you refer to are self-made problems within the county of Dallas and the municipalities within Dallas, and I think you would agree with that.
So it takes a report by the House's research group which said that many of the problems arose from the way that the city administered the new program. So I wouldn't disagree with you there.
Certainly not. And in all fairness, I want to say that I've talked to some of the officials in Dallas and in the city of Dallas, the county and the city, and they're big enough and have acknowledged that some of the problems are of their own making. So I can cite you other examples across the state where counties and the cities and the municipalities within those counties have gotten together. They have closely coordinated their effort. They're in a full state of cooperation, and the whole thing is working very well. So
what you're saying is in those areas where it looks like the legislation builds in unfairness, we should see changes.
Let's do something about it.
Where it looks like the cities have to get together, that ought to be their burden.
Absolutely. And I think the members of the legislature with whom I discuss these kinds of things, I think they are fully appreciative of the problems that you're referring to, and I, again, will make a prediction that you will have perfecting legislation in this regard.
Before we return to Dave McNeely for the second round of questions, I'd like to give you the phone number that you can call with your own questions for Governor Clements tonight. That number is area code 512-474-5071. Again, area code 512-474-5071. You may call collect from anywhere in your viewing area. Okay, Dave, we will start the second round of questions, please.
Governor, do you really think it would be possible to cut the taxes at the national level by 10%, increase defense spending, and still balance the budget?
I do. I think that that Dave, you will have to look at this as more than a one-year project. I want to qualify what I said by you're not going to do this in the first year. You may not do it in the second year, but I am satisfied that you can do it in the third year. And I feel confident that Governor Reagan will strenuously work to bring this about, and that he understands that a serious part, an important part of the mandate that he's received from the American public entails these conditions that you refer to.
What happens if that's not happening by the third year?
Well, then I think that the Democrats have an issue. And And so they then can talk in terms of those issues, like some people that I know very well talked about the issues in this campaign.
Susan, right?
Governor, according to reports I read, Mexico has now set some limits on its exports of crude oil, natural gas sales to the United States and other customers. And the lid on natural gas is at what we're buying now at our current levels, and they do not expect a very substantial increase under these limits would be possible for us in buying more oil. Venezuela wants more benefits. The war in the Mideast is threatening, potentially, our supplies. Are you going to be recommending to Governor Reagan in any of these areas some actions or directions that he might move, and can you, particularly in response to the action by Mexico, suggest any ways that the United States might deal with these limits?
I suspect that you read the same article in the paper that I read.
It's a Wall Street Journal story.
Yeah, that covered this topic. And I was impressed by the fact that this was not President Lopez Portillo who said this. This was someone within the executive branch, and neither was it the head of Pemex that said this. As a matter of fact, it was a name that was not familiar to me. So I would say to you that Mexico's production, and this is the first part of your question, that Mexico's production will be to some extent curtailed insofar as it relates to what they have as a potential. Now that's different than what this article said. I would remind you, and Dave will remember, that during the past several months I have said that Mexico was going to be very prudent and careful as to how they expanded their production of both oil and gas. That they wanted to do this in a way that would not bring on a terrible problem of inflation, as some other countries have experienced under similar circumstances.
But are you suggesting that they are not then intending to limit their exports to their customers by these quotas? I mean, are you saying that the Wall Street Journal story was inaccurate?
Yeah, I'm saying that, if that's the way you want to interpret it. I'm saying that this is again, a very complex matter of international policy. I'm also saying to you that no one is going to make this decision except the President of Mexico. In this instance, this is Lopez Portillo. And that it will be a matter of negotiation on a bilateral basis between sovereign states. And I think that Mexico will increase their production. I do think that it will have a cap or limit on it as to how they proceed in this regard, and that it will not be expanded or increased to suit our requirements. Now, that's what we really come down to. That Mexico is very conscious of the fact that as they increase that production in the world market at something plus or minus $40 a barrel or $35 a barrel, that this could cause terrible inflationary trends within Mexico. And that as they expand their production, they want to be able to use those proceeds properly and for the long-term benefit of Mexico. And President Lopez Portillo has told me directly that he wants to build an industrial base that will be integrated, totally integrated, and can then move towards export of products as opposed to export of oil. So I think that you have to look at all of these kinds of pronouncements within that framework.
Susan?
It's a good question.
Roberta?
Thank you. Governor, last summer there was a strike in Hereford, Texas on the part of farm workers there against some of the onion growers. It really didn't hurt the price of onions a lot, but what it did do was establish publicly the growing power of the Texas Farm Workers Union. At present, that union, whether or not it's recognized by the growers and farmers, cannot strike, cannot bargain collectively. And a Dallas legislator has introduced a bill to permit farm workers to have the right to bargain collectively and to strike. If such a bill passed, would you veto it?
Who is the legislator that you refer to?
Sam Hudson.
Sam Hudson. He has a very poor record of getting legislation through. And I don't know what the number was, but I heard some comment in the last legislative session that, you know, in baseball terms, he was batting about 10%, that is. So I would say to you that I think that the chances of that kind of legislation is practically nil. And I think it's highly speculative to think that it's going to pass the legislature, much less get my approval.
Do you support that kind of legislation?
First of all, I want to repeat what I said. I think it's highly speculative to think that it's going to pass the legislature. But if it did pass the legislature, I would veto it.
Why?
Because I don't think it's in the interest of our farm workers in Texas to engage in strikes and that sort of thing.
Governor and panel, we are going to go to some viewer calls right now. We will be returning to you a little bit later in tonight's program. Again, we are ready for your calls for Governor Bill Clements tonight, and please go ahead.
Yes, Governor Clements, my name is Tinsley. I'm calling from Guadalupe County. I'm a little concerned. I'm wondering how in the world we are going to get good teachers and keep good teachers and get rid of the bad ones when we continually come up with across-the-board pay increases for the good ones and the bad ones both.
Thank
and
you.
I'll hang up and let you answer on the TV.
Thank you.
Well, the program that is now underway and has been approved by the leadership in both the House and the Senate and was reported out of the study committee, and incidentally TEA, Texas Education Agency, has also approved it, calls for a total increase of about 22% over the 2-year budgetary period. And included in that 22% is an allocation, and I'm trying to remember correctly, but I think it was like 3% of that total would be included for increases for those who deserve those increases. So we would hope to be able to pass legislation and this kind of a program that would allow us then to instigate within the system in some form. And let's be honest about it. We're not talking about a definitive form, but we would have a kitty within that 22% of about 3% that would be held back for merit increases. So that certainly will help us in this problem to which you refer. And I concur with you completely. It is a problem. And we do need to have a process by which we can identify those very, very competent professional teachers that I know that we have in our system and recognize those teachers and help them in the way that they should be helped.
Our next caller is on the line. Please go ahead with your question for the governor.
My name is David Boyd, and I'm calling from Austin. And my question is about mining lignite. I was wondering if the governor felt the need for any further legislation concerning reclaiming the land, or if the laws that we have now are sufficient to protect the land.
Thank you.
I think that your question is very pertinent and one that many, many Texans are asking themselves in regard to lignite. I had the opportunity here about 4 or 5, 6 months ago to visit the operation at Mount Pleasant, Texas, where Texas Utilities has had a major mining effort underway for a number of years, has in fact reclaimed literally thousands of acres of Texas farmland where they have mined the surface lignite and have supported the power plant that they have in the area that uses lignite. I think you would be astounded at what they have done. And in my judgment, and I do have a farming background, I would say to you that that reclaimed land at this point is more fertile, more productive, than comparable land in the same area that was not mined and hasn't been handled in the way that this has been handled. This has all been done under the auspices of Texas A&M, and I think it's an absolutely outstanding, superb program. And I would say to you, in answer directly to your question, that I do not think from an environmental standpoint and from a long-term conservation standpoint that in this particular instance that we in Texas need to be concerned. I think we're in good shape.
We have another caller. Go ahead with your question, please.
Good day. My name is Roy Browning. I live in Houston, Texas. All right. In a past statement of yours, I believe you support bilingual education.
I do.
All right. Would you please explain why? Because you're breaking a 200-year tradition. Truth being unalterable has been both fair and just to all races entering the United States seeking a new beginning.
Well, I'm going to try to make a very involved subject, short and not too complex here. We in Texas have a unique situation with regard to the Hispanic culture that has existed here in our state over the past many years. And we are constantly being confronted with an inflow of Mexicans who come into Texas to work at the present time illegally for the most part. Now, it's recently been ruled in the federal courts that until further hearings are held before the Supreme Court, that we in our public school system must accommodate these children and let them go into our public school system. I'm in accord with this ruling. This ruling was by the Supreme Court Justice Lewis Powell. And under those circumstances, we're going to proceed. And our Texas law says that we will have bilingual education through the 3rd grade. And at the end of the 3rd grade, there will be a transition take place. And from that point forward, we will then have English as the primary language and Spanish as a secondary language. I think this is terribly important, and I am in agreement that we do need a transition period of 3 years wherein we can take these children who do not have the capability of the English language at that time and let them go through a 3-year transition period. I will make another prediction for you, and that is that the Texas legislature and our Texas Education Agency will maintain this program and try to enhance it and enrich it and improve it as we can. I think it's a good program, and it's one that we ought to have.
Governor, Susan Wright has a follow-up to that viewer question.
Yes, as you know, Governor, one of the major problems in complying with these court cases and government regulations has been the shortage of bilingual teachers, and it has been suggested in Houston by School Superintendent Billy Reagan that somebody establish, perhaps the state, institutions in Mexico to train teachers for these school districts in Texas. I wonder if you'd favor that idea.
Well, I have to admit, I haven't heard that before. But I have a great respect for Mr. Wright, and I would hope that
this is Billy Reagan in Houston.
Reagan?
In Houston.
Oh, Linus was there.
Yes.
Yeah, all right.
He's now in Dallas.
Okay, he's in Dallas.
He's in Dallas.
So Mr. Reagan is there now. Well, I have a great respect for him, too. So. And I do. So if he has that kind of an innovative idea, and certainly it is innovative, I have not heard of it until right now. I'd be happy to look at it and evaluate it. It doesn't sound too bad to me because I agree with you and what he has said, that so far as our system is concerned, we do lack competent teachers in the volume that we need to have the kind of program that I would be proud of in our public school system. And I used such words a while ago as improve, enrich, and enhance our bilingual educational program. And that's exactly what I was talking about. We need better teachers and more competent teachers in this regard.
Governor, our next caller is online. Please go ahead with your question for the governor.
Governor, I'm Albert Miller, in Navasota, Texas. The Texas Department of Corrections informs us that they have chosen the Grimes County site above 29 other sites. And the board, due to the recommendations of the Site Selection Committee, has decided the prison facility will be in Grimes County, Texas. Governor Clements, my question is this. If there is enough opposition to this facility in our county, will you veto the site?
Thank you.
Well, first let me make it clear to everybody that while I have read in the papers and I've heard on television through the media that a site, as you say, has been chosen, I want to remind you that a site can't be chosen until such time as a three-man board meets, and I happen to be a member of that three-man board, and approves the site. So there is no site chosen at this point in a final sense. There may be a site that will come to me as a recommended site, but I can assure you that until that board of approval meets and until we sign off on that site, there is no site picked per se. Now, I have stated before that no prison site in Texas should be finally chosen until there have indeed been public hearings within the community and let all of the people speak to the issue that are affected within that particular community, municipality, city, or county, or whatever. At this point, there have been no public hearings. At this point, I have not received a formal recommendation from the prison board. Now, that may sound rather odd to you because there's been so much publicity about this particular site in your county. But I have checked today, and I still have not received a formal recommendation from the prison board with respect to this site that you refer to. So until I get that recommendation, until we have public hearings, I can't tell you what my answer will be because I have not looked at any of the briefing papers or the supporting data with respect to the site in your county. Now, having said all that, let me say another thing about these prisons. We in Texas today have some 29,000 people in our Texas prison system. I'm talking about prisoners, 29,000 plus. We actually have more people in prison in Texas than any other state, regardless of population. We are in a crowded condition so far as our prisons are concerned. Our crime rate is high in Texas. There's no question about that. That's why these people are in prison. Now, we are under a federal review right now. There is a federal judge who is reviewing our situation with respect to overcrowding in the prisons and the manner in which we house these people. I have a strong conviction that we in Texas are going to be forced by a federal court order to relieve the crowded conditions in our prisons, and I concur with this. I think that we should. So under these circumstances, I can tell you as your governor that we're going to need perhaps not one, but maybe as many as an additional 2 or 3 prisons in our Texas prison system within the short term of, say, the next 10 years. Under those circumstances, I, as your governor, or my successor governors, whoever they may be, will ultimately have to make a decision in the interest of the state with respect to a prison site, irrespective of the public hearings and the objections that might or might not be raised. In this particular instance, I am told, I don't have the papers, I've already said this, but I am told that there is significant support in the county, within the area, by the local people for the prison site. Now, until I get all this in a formal way and I have the report before me, That's the only answer I can give you.
Dave McNeely, you've got a question.
Governor, given the crowded situation and the need, as you say, to build a couple additional prisons, apparently, your rate of turn down of paroles upon recommendation of parole supervisors and the parole board has been higher than, much higher, as I understand, than previous governors. Do you think that perhaps you're playing a role in the crowded condition?
Dave, it's possible. You know, I acknowledge that that our turn down on paroles is somewhat higher. The factual data supports this, and if you'll recall, I have furnished this data to the press on other occasions. It may be because of the dual system that we've had, and this was recently established, as you remember, by the legislature, and I will introduce legislation this time to have a closer connection and better communication and coordination between the parole commissioners as established by the legislature and the parole board. These are two separate bodies now, and I have to say to you that their communication is not too good. And I would say to you that that is a contributing factor to this condition that we have now. So I am going to introduce legislation that will try to bring about, in full consultation with both the House and the Senate, a better system that will bring together the parole commissioners and the parole board and pull them together on a more common cause than they have heretofore been. Now, I certainly have not intentionally brought on any higher rate of refusal or turn down, as you have stated. But I only act, frankly, and I think it's well that the public understand this, I really only act on the recommendation as it moves forward through the system, and I would hesitate to step outside that system and start making arbitrary decisions based on my own judgment, which, as you can well imagine, is limited in this regard. Now, in addition to that, I think that there is a significant feeling in the public sector that some of these parolees have been let out too soon, and that there are recurring crimes on a very high percentage rate among those people who have been paroled too early. And so that's a counterbalance to the other side of that issue. So this is a difficult one. It's not easy, and I certainly have it under consideration.
Governor and panel, we are going to return to more of your questions, and we are ready for our next caller. Please go ahead.
Good evening, Governor. My name is Bill Haberman. I live at Bulverde, Texas. In about 2 years from now, I believe, Governor, we're going to have an election that will be relative to Senator Benson's position in Washington. I'm asking...
It'll also be relative to my position in Austin.
Sir?
It'll also be relative to my position in Austin.
Granted. But my question to you, Governor, is this. Will you vigorously support a man like Roger Staubach to retire Senator Benson to his orchard farm? I'll hang up and listen.
Thank you.
Well, I first have to say that I have vigorously supported Roger Staubach for years and have admired his career, and I mean that. And that started back when he was actually at the Naval Academy, and he was the captain of the Academy football team and the winner of the Heisman Award in his junior year when he was at the Naval Academy. So I have known of Roger and admired him for many, many years. I think the first thing that has to be stated with it, in order for me to not start something here that would get out of hand, my impression is that Roger Staubach has no intention whatsoever of getting into the political arena anytime soon. Now, he has not foreclosed this. He has told me that ultimately, because of his very, very high interest and commitment to our political system, that, that he may ultimately want to get into politics, but that he certainly has no near or short-term ambitions in this regard. So I'd be very surprised if he'd be a candidate for the Senate 2 years from now. In fact, he's told me that he wouldn't be. Now, people change their minds, and that may not be, you know, final, but those are his words. Now, I can assure you, on the other side, and forgetting Roger for the moment, I can assure you that the Republican Party will field a very fine candidate in opposition to Senator Benson. I don't think there's any question about that.
We are ready for our next caller. Please go ahead.
Governor, you've indicated, my name is Steve Johnson from Blanco. You've indicated approval of some type of merit pay for teachers. Would you approve a merit pay system for all state employees, including governor? Why or why not?
Sure I would. I think that'd be great.
Okay. We are ready for the next caller. You're on the line. Please, go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Governor Clements, this is George Jackson of Fort Worth, Texas. And what I've got here is in Jacksboro, they have gone up on my taxes 658% on a farm that we have there in Jacksboro. And that isn't right. A man can't go to a farm and raise anything for the school board to go up 658%. And what can we do about it?
Thank you.
Well, the first thing I would suggest that you do is appeal to your Board of Equalization there in the county. There is such a body, and I would hope that you've already gone before that Board of Equalization and appealed your case to them. They have a burden under the present legislation and also before that your land must be taxed on the same fair basis as your neighbors and adjacent land. And certainly I'm sure that you don't want to pay less taxes than your neighbors, and at the same time you don't want to pay more either. So you and your neighbors should compare tax assessments and find out if it's on a fair and equitable and standard base. And if it is, why, then you're probably going to have to pay it. But on the other hand, if it is not equitable and it's not in conformity with your neighbors or the people within that general vicinity for comparable land, it's all based on comparability, then I'd suggest that you make your appeal to your Board of Equalization, and if they don't give you proper attention, then I'd go get me a good attorney and I would take it to court.
Governor Roberta Hammond would like to follow up on that.
On that complicated issue, and this is a speculative question. The state of Texas realizes a lot of money from property tax, and therefore this state is able to support itself. But will there come a time, Governor, when the property taxes are too high and all the revenue we get from oil and gas sales will disappear because there's a finite supply of those things? Will there have to be eventually another way of supporting this state? And I'm thinking of income tax.
Well, it's a very good question, and it concerns an awful lot of people who are looking down the road for, you know, not only 15 years or 20 years, but 30 and 40 and 50 years. And I'm not going to get sidetracked here and start talking about something that is different than your issue, but this is exactly the reason that I have instituted a project called Texas 2000, where we are retrospectively looking at what we've done in the past and what these tax bases are that you're talking about. That's just one piece of what we're looking at. But everything about our state we're looking at retrospectively in a historical sense of where we've been, where we are now, and where we're going, particularly as it relates to these depleting resources. You referred to oil and gas, but it also refers to a lot of other things. So we need to be thinking, and very seriously, as to how we are going to address this tax base in the years to come when we do not have these reservoirs of natural resources that we're drawing on now in the form of severance taxes like on oil and gas. So this is very much on my mind, and it's a problem that I am confident will rear its ugly head in the years in the future, and we need to be thinking about those solutions right now and making our plans accordingly, and that's why I have instituted this particular study. While I'm saying that, though, I also need to add that we have a very comfortable surplus in our state government right now. And as Dave knows, and some of the others in our Capitol press, I have stated for some time that that surplus will be in the neighborhood of $1 billion, and it is. So right now, it's not a question of increasing taxes, it's a question of how shall we return this surplus in an equitable fashion to all the people of Texas and reduce their taxes as opposed to increasing their taxes.
Then we turn now to our viewer calls, and we're ready for the next one. Please go ahead.
Yes, sir, Governor Clements. I'm Mark Maroney in Dripping Springs, and Representative Dan Kubiak has constantly introduced legislation promoting gasohol. And I was wondering, sir, how important a role do you think gasohol will play in the upcoming legislature, considering the high expense of producing it and the fact that recent figures have shown that because of its expense, it's not a viable alternative energy source?
Thank you.
Well, I have to admit that the numbers today do indicate that it is not a viable alternative source in the sense that it is competitive, and that's what you're talking about. But I would suggest to you that within the short term, and I'm talking about in short term the next 5 years, that gasohol will be competitive, and therefore we in Texas have a real burden to get on our horse and do something about this now, so far as standardizing the kind of licensing arrangement that we would have by subsidizing some research and development programs through our academic institutions such as A&M, by changing the legislative process where permitting is easier and is done on a more standard form than is presently available, make some kind of an accommodation with respect to alcohol, because gasohol is alcohol. Let's be honest about this. This is what we're talking about. And whether we're going to allow commercial alcohol to be produced in such form that it could be readily changed over to drinking alcohol, and it's a relatively minor change to bring this about, whether or not we're going to encourage the kind of capital investment that it will take to put into a major gasohol plant, and that will run into the range of like $15 million. And with all of these things, try to bring together a program that 5 years from now will result in a significant production of gasohol. Now, what is significant production of gasohol? About 10%. And I would remind you that if we could produce from our maize or milo grains or corn, if we could produce that kind of gasohol in Texas, it would in a large measure stabilize for our farmers their grain production. And I think that's highly desirable. So I want to make it absolutely clear that I am a strong proponent of gasohol, and I will again make a prediction that our Texas legislature in this coming session will constructively go forward and change some of the legislative procedures and the permitting and licensing procedures wherein we will encourage and help gasohol production in the state of Texas. I'm all for it.
We have time for one, perhaps two more calls before we return to our panel for a wrap-up. Please go ahead with our next caller online. Go ahead, please.
Governor Clements, my name is Don Roddy from Dallas. I'm a small businessman, and I can ship to all 47 contiguous states using United Parcel Service. However, I cannot ship within Texas using United Parcel Service. are there any plans to remove this restriction on free trade?
Thank you.
Well, you've stumped me. I can't respond to that, and I'll have to look into it. I did not know that intra-state use of this system was not available to us in Texas. I was just not aware of that, so I'll have to look into it, and I can't comment.
Okay, we do have time for one more question. Please go ahead.
Yes, I'm Henry Cobb from Austin, Texas. And Governor, I'd like to know how you feel that Texas should handle its policy on nuclear power.
Thank you. How should Texas handle its policy on nuclear power?
Well, right now, of course, we're under a national regulatory body, the national, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has jurisdiction in this regard, and the state really plays a relatively minor role. I am satisfied that the NRC, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, will relax some of their rules and regulations in this regard in order to accelerate the cycle. It now takes us in the United States about 10 to 12 years to complete a nuclear plant as opposed to 5 or 6 years in England or France or Germany, Brazil or Japan. So I would look for some relaxation in this regard. And there is a policy, a Texas policy that exists today. It's a Texas position on energy. And that Texas position on energy says that we should encourage the use of nuclear power. So I'm in accord with that. It's a unanimous decision. It was reached by all of the senior elected officials of the state of Texas. So I think that we in Texas should look for, and it would be desirable to have more nuclear power in Texas.
Dave McNeely can start the questioning from our distinguished panel tonight for the final round.
Governor, you're former Deputy Secretary of Defense for the United States, and you're now Governor of Texas. Do you favor putting the MX missile system in West Texas and New Mexico?
No, and I've told you for some time that that's not going to happen. And the Air Force has just recently released a report wherein they say that their preferred sites are in Utah and Nevada, and they see no reason why that's not going to be where they're going to be put.
Susan?
Governor, I don't want to go back to the publication you said was wrong on a story, but today the Wall Street Journal had a story that discussed the Wall Street position on nuclear power, which is getting more and more bearish. Many big-name firms and funds were avoiding nuclear power investments, and the Journal said if this erosion of financial support spreads, it could do more to foreclose a future for atom-powered electricity than all the efforts of the nuclear opponents combined. Is there any kind of financial borrowing problem that this industry could have, which apparently is definitely a possibility that would undermine your position or the Texas position on nuclear power?
No question about it.
At what point would you say that it did not look feasible?
I beg your pardon?
At what point would you say it does not look feasible?
Well, these things are handled by bonding issues that are issued by the public utilities. In the case of Houston Power and Light, or us here in Austin, or in the case of Texas Utilities at Glen Rose, all of these plants are financed through a bonding arrangement wherein they do their financing in the public sector. And you can either sell your bonds or you can't.
Or you can sell them at a higher cost.
Yes, but those have to be approved too. You're right back where you were with your local municipalities and your areas of jurisdiction through the Public Utility Commission, and there's a limit to what they will approve as an interest rate on those bonds, because that becomes a big item of expense in that construction process. So when you're talking about a multi-billion-dollar project, which these will be in subsequent years, and you talk about interest rates as high as they presently are, and they may get higher, and you have to build that cost in over a dry period of 10 or 12 years, which it now is from conception to production, and absorb those kind of costs, all of that is built back into your rates that then go into the price of your electricity. So I certainly agree with the Wall Street Journal. If that financial base or the availability of those capital funds dries up, then that solves the problem, because it's not going to happen.
Roberta?
Governor, I have a question, a lighter question about your personal style.
A lighter question.
It's lighter.
Sounds to me like it might get rid of the heavy.
Well, that was my question. You say what's on your mind, and you say it usually very directly. And I know that you've been referred to as at least abrasive.
By some people. Let's make that clear.
Of course, by
Rita
some
never
people.
said that.
And I haven't yet said it. But I wonder if that criticism bothers you, if you're aware of it, or if you think you have a personal style.
I never really have thought about it. You know, at my age and my time in life and my career, I'm what I am. And I have made that statement on other occasions. And I think the people of Texas know what they bought. And you take me warts and all. So, you know, I'm just like everybody else. There's some good and there's some bad and there's some indifferent. And it's awfully hard to teach an old dog new tricks. And I'm an old dog.
Fairly quickly.
Yeah, about a minute and a half, Dave, is all we got.
Fairly quick one here, Governor. State Senator Bill Meyer of Euless, who was elected to the Senate as a Democrat during this election, stepped out front for Ronald Reagan, along with other so-called Democrats for Nixon. He was one of the few, Democrats for Reagan.
One of the few.
Did he make a deal? Would you support him for Lieutenant Governor in 1982 as a Republican?
Well, Dave, first of all, I have not known, and certainly I have not read anywhere where Bill Meyer has said that he's going to become a Republican. Has he told you that?
No, sir, he hadn't told me that. I thought maybe he told you that.
No, I really don't know if that's a fact or not. I have heard some rumors to that effect, but I've never heard him say anything like that. I've never seen any publications in that regard. What he may or may not do in this respect, I just don't know. And let's assume for the moment.
Governor, I'm about to have to interrupt. I'm sorry.
All right.
Governor, panel, many thanks. We have run out of time.
It's a good question, Dave. We'll do it next time.
I'd like to thank Roberta Hammond from KERA in Dallas, Susan Wright from KUHT in Houston, Dave McNeely from the Austin American-Statesman for being with us tonight. And to our viewers, with all of your calls for the Governor tonight, many thanks. We hope you're able to join us again for next month's Governor's Report, to be broadcast on December 18th. Thanks and good night.
The Governor's Report is presented as a public service by this station and the other public television stations in the state. Join us again next month when The Governor's Report will air on Thursday, December 18th at 8 o'clock Central Standard Time. Because of previous program commitments, some stations may carry the program.
The Governor's Report is made possible by grants from American Steel Building Company, Incorporated, Boring and Tunneling Company of America, Incorporated, and Perry Homes of Houston.
The Governor's Report is produced live and distributed by satellite to the public television and radio stations in Texas and to the affiliates of the Texas State Network. Join us again next month when the Governor... Live from Austin, the Governor's Report with Texas Governor Bill Clements. Tonight, Governor Clements will be questioned about legislative issues and other state government business by reporters in the studio and by citizens watching and listening across the state. Now, to introduce this month's program, here is moderator Joel Fowler.
Good evening. The Texas legislature is beyond the halfway point in its 67th session. In the process, it has passed a dozen or so bills from the hundreds which have been submitted. Still in the works are proposals to raise the ceiling on interest rates to 24% and the legal drinking age to 19. Several of the governor's anti-crime bills and redistricting are still awaiting action in the second half. Tonight, we'll be taking questions from our audience across the state. Volunteers from the Austin chapter of the League of Women Voters are standing by to answer your calls a little later in tonight's program. With us in our studios tonight, we have Bo Byers, Capitol Bureau Chief for the Houston Chronicle, Susan Wright from public television station KUHT in Houston, and Dave McNeely, political editor for the Austin American Statesman. Governor Clements, panel, welcome to tonight's program.
Good.
Governor, do you have any opening remarks?
No, I'd rather answer the questions.
If that's the case, we'll get started right away with Bo Byers.
Governor Clements, you said today that the legislative budget writers should cut the two-year general appropriation bill $2.5 billion below the roughly $26 billion plus that has been proposed. And you urged that because you said that Congress possibly may reduce federal aid to Texas by that amount, $2.5 billion. What convinces you that there will be such heavy cuts by Congress?
Well, Bo, it's not just my opinion. Before I met with the press this morning at 11, I'd spent an hour with Speaker Clayton and Lieutenant Governor Hobby, and there's basically no disagreement between us. I want to qualify the $2.5 billion by saying that that's not an exact number, it's an estimate. But we feel that because of the Reagan administration's position with respect to the budget, and because of the acceptance and apparent agreement by both the House and the Senate in Washington, that we can expect approximately a 1/2 reduction in the federal funds that flow into the programs that have been feeding Texas, so to speak, with these federal programs. Now, that's an estimate. It may not be quite that much. I doubt that it will be more than that. And the way we get there is that with the budget that we have been operating on and with right now, we had approximately $5 billion of federal funds included in that budget, roughly. We feel like that the funding level will be reduced approximately in half. So that would be $2.5 billion. And we need to take a very hard look at our budgetary process and keep in mind that those programs will probably be cut.
Susan, Wright?
Governor, I'd like to talk a little bit about gasohol. It seemed like such a good idea, but so far in the legislature, best I can make out from the clip file is that there are some wrangles going on over who should regulate it. There are questions about who should own a producer of gasohol, and apparently it isn't settled as to whether or not it's going to be exempt from a state gasoline tax. Meanwhile, Business Week is airing some very grim predictions about gasohol. They're saying that some operators, like City Service, have scrapped their plans to get into it. People are looking at it very cautiously. The production figures and predictions are way down, and people are saying the next 6 months for this young industry is going to be real critical. Where's Texas going to fall out on that?
Well, hopefully we will end up with an appropriate bill that will help the gasohol industry to get started in Texas. You know, we're really significantly behind some of the Midwestern states like Nebraska and Iowa, Kansas, those kind of states right now. I feel very strongly about this. I think that we should have a gasohol bill. I think it should be structured in a way that doesn't fragment it. Right now they're talking about 3 different agencies all having something to do with it. So I'd like to have one agency overview our gasohol program.
Would that be the Railroad Commission?
I think the Railroad Commission would be the most appropriate. Now, under these circumstances, we have to remember that what you perhaps have been reading in the various national magazines about gasohol not being economically feasible at the present market situation, I think is true. And I would remind some of you that I've been talking about that for some time, and that's the purpose of excusing the gasoline tax on gasohol, which is a slight way of subsidizing the gasohol program. But the gasohol programs are going to need help until we get them underway and until we then obtain the economies of scale by having, you know, some significant production in gasohol.
So you favor the sales tax exemption?
I do. I do. I think that the last calculations I ran on this, that this would in effect give about a 50-cent a gallon subsidy to gasohol. And in order to get this industry underway, it's going to need a subsidy to make it economically feasible for these investments to take place. So I am in favor of this, and a lot of people do not realize that gasohol is in fact only 10% derivative alcohol, and the other 90% is commercial gasoline. So there really isn't the absolute gallonage figure savings in gasohol as it relates to our energy shortage. And of course right now you also have to take into account that we have a tremendous surplus of gasoline inventories in stock at the present time. That's temporary, but nevertheless that's a factor in all these considerations. And lastly, I'd like to emphasize that gasohol can be very important to Texas because of all the grain production that we have in Texas, particularly our milo grains. And some people refer to this as high gear. And so we would go a long ways towards stabilizing that milo grain market, the sorghum grain type markets, if we had a thriving and really prosperous gasohol industry in Texas, and it would be a great boon to our farmers to stabilize that market.
Dave McNeely.
Governor, to follow briefly on what Bo asked you about a while ago, if you take $2.5 billion out of the Texas budget for the next 2 years, are you inferring then that money is going to come out of some social programs that have been taken care of, social and other programs that have been taken care of partly with federal money, that the Texas legislature is then going to have to pick up and carry on some of those that they consider worthwhile?
In part, Dave, that's exactly what will happen. I would imagine that as this comes to a conclusion, that we'll find that there'll be all kinds of programs. Some of them will be on a 100% basis, some will be on a matching basis, some will be merely reduced to where we can easily carry those programs. And so we can't generalize about this, except that we do have a problem, and it's a very serious problem. And what has happened in the past is that when we start talking about a $26 or $25 billion budget for the 2-year biennium, we have always thrown in these federal funds as being a part of that budget. And when in fact what our controller really certifies are only state funds as a matter of certification. In this biennium, he has certified on the last count, I think something slightly over $19 billion, between $19 and $20 billion. So the difference there of $5 or $6 billion, those funds are federal funds. And yet we look upon that as a total number, or an absolute number, as the budget of the state of Texas, when in fact it really isn't.
Well, what I'm curious about then, if we are going to have to cut back $2.5 billion and make up some of the programs that are now federally funded and that will then have to be made up to some extent with state funds if they are to be continued, then any idea of having a surplus that would go into a water fund is kind of a dream, isn't it?
It's rather dim. I don't think there's any question about that. And this morning in my discussions with Lieutenant Governor Hobby and Speaker Clayton, we talked about that. And I think realistically, the surplus that I have known that existed under the then existing circumstance, that surplus will probably be used up, and we won't have a surplus to meet our needs under these sets of conditions. And so, answering your question, I think that establishing a water trust fund under these conditions will be very difficult.
Governor?
Go ahead, Bo.
I still have difficulty. I realize that you don't know, none of us know, what specific programs might be cut as far as that federal aid is concerned. But I have trouble comprehending how you can cut $2.5 billion and sustain some of the major programs that the state has in its budget there, because most of those federal aid funds that the state gets, aside from highways, go to education and to what we now call human resources, which is the old welfare department.
That's right.
And so...
And some into MH and MRs.
Yeah, some into MH/MR.
Yeah.
But the major programs, it seems to me, are that rely heavily on federal aid are the human resources and education programs. And if you knock $2.5 billion out of those programs, what I don't understand is how you're going to sustain that by any shift, what you call supplemental state funding, to keep those programs up.
I don't think that we can in total, Bo, and I don't think that I've ever inferred or insinuated that we can.
But if you shift some funds, whatever the amount, to those programs, then obviously you are going to eliminate that funding for some other programs that don't
Not necessarily.
That don't have as high priority.
I would refer you back, you know, to the fact that for some months I've been saying that in my judgment through our state funds, the flow of our state funds, that we had somewhere in the neighborhood of $1 billion surplus. Now, it's going to take probably all of that surplus and a realignment of several of those programs. Establishing priorities is what we're going to have to do to bring this thing into a proper focus. When you finally boil down the net balance of what we're talking about, and I think that's the best perspective that I can give you on it, is that the budget as contemplated by both the governor's office and also LLB, the Legislative Budget Board, why we were talking about an increase in the overall state budget of somewhere around 21–22%. Under these circumstances, we'll still have an increase over the present programs of about 10 or 11%. So what we're talking about is instead of having a 21–22% increase, we're going to have approximately half that increase over the present programs.
Well, again, one of my difficulties on understanding how you can, whether a 10% increase is going to be feasible, is such a tremendous amount of all the money in the state budget goes to salaries. And we're talking about substantial salary increases for state employees, for teachers, for college faculty. And it seems to me that all these are going to be impacted by any shifting in priorities.
I don't think there's any question whatsoever about that. And you know, there, as the old saying goes, there's more than one way to skin this cat. And you've been hearing me talk about reducing the state bureaucracy and reducing personnel in some of the agencies and all. And I would say to you in an oversimplification that what we're going to do is we're going to do more with fewer people.
Susan?
Texas gets kind of a black eye continually in certain areas of its per capita funding. And I'll take two that are pretty divergent. They probably shouldn't even be addressed in the same question, but I'm going to do it anyway. One is aid to dependent children, and the other is the arts. I don't know if we're last in aid to dependent children, but we are last in the arts. I know that you previously said that you don't think it's well to solve problems by simply throwing money at them, but at what point do you think we could say that a certain amount of money would be an appropriate amount of money to give per child in a dependent family situation where they are truly needy and not cheating the system? And where would you like to see Texas rank in its support for the arts?
Well, those are two rather divergent questions.
I was afraid I wouldn't get to them both unless I asked them together.
First of all, let me say that Rita is very much involved in this aid for dependent children. And she was in El Paso today on a program where we are trying to take these mothers who head up the households in most instances. I think she told me tonight that it was like 80% of those households are headed by a female, the mother. And they're having to look after these children.
$34 a child per month.
That's right. So what we're trying to do here is to bring about a program where those mothers are trained to go out into the job market and obtain a job that will considerably increase their earning power. And this has been highly successful. During the past year, there were slightly over 500 of these heads of households, these female heads of households, where the women were trained to take on gainful employment in the private sector. So I think there are a lot of things that can be done on a very cost-effective basis that will be meaningful by reducing these numbers in a significant way, and at the same time not spend so much government money in regard to their welfare.
On the allowance per child, though, would you agree with some people who say that it ought to be at $50 or $60 a month per child as opposed to $34 a month?
I don't know. You know, I hesitate to provide an incentive for having more children who become dependent and fall under the program.
Well,
right
let's just
now,
take the ones that are there already.
This is an issue that needs to be addressed. I said the other day that I thought the ceiling that we now have in Texas for this kind of thing should be increased, this kind of help, and I believe that it should.
How much?
Well,
I'm trying to get a dollar figure out of
well,
it.
you're not going to get it, so we can go on to the next part of your question, because I'm not prepared to give you that tonight. We are talking about an increase. I think we should probably have an increase in this direction, but I think we need to be careful about how we administer that increase and stay away from providing an incentive under these kind of circumstances. Now, the second part of your question has to do with the arts.
Yes, where would you like Texas to rank in its per capita support of the arts?
Well, I think if you go about your statistics in a different way, they will change in a most amazing way. When you take the interest that we have in arts across Texas, whether it's in Amarillo or Fort Worth or Dallas or Houston or San Antonio or in Austin, and you look at the museums that are either privately supported and or city supported, and think in those terms as opposed to the state of Texas per se undertaking a great subsidization, so to speak, of the art programs, I think you'll find a very, very different picture. For instance, there is a very outstanding museum that's being built in Dallas at the moment. I think the building itself is going to run somewhere around $35 or $40 million, and they already have committed well over $100 million in art that will be immediately going into that museum. I think all of that has to be considered when you start talking about what we in the state should be doing to bring about an appreciation of the arts. And I don't think that you can look at the appropriation that goes through the legislature and use that as your only criteria.
Well, let's say it's not the only criteria. How can we get into some sort of number? We're spending 9.3 cents per capita now, and New York spends $1.87 per capita. I mean, are you willing to say where
we
on that
want to
scale
be like
like
New
to
York? The answer is no.
No.
That was a fine example. Do you have another one that we can talk about?
Let me make one quick follow-up.
Please do. Please
do you really think that $50 a month, $600 a year is an incentive to someone to have a kid?
No, Dave, but there are situations in California, for instance, and once again, Rita and I were talking about this evening, where a dependent family with a mother as the head of the household, and I think it's with 8 children, gets $2,000 a month in California. Well, I think that to provide an incentive for that head of household to go out and be trained and to get a job would be rather difficult. And what I don't want to do is to get ourselves in that kind of position where we are providing an incentive to not train oneself and to not go out into the job market and not become gainfully employed. I've already said that I do think it should be increased. I have not said the amount that I think it should be increased.
Well, if you avoid, I mean, if you punish a child, isn't the child liable to wind up in prison somewhere and cost the state eventually a lot more money in loss of taxes, plus perhaps costing someone their life or the savings from their 7-Eleven store, and then you've got to feed and clothe and take care of this person in prison for the rest of his natural life, perhaps?
I think that these certainly are all factors to be considered. And this is a very, very difficult area of state administration. I would be the last person in the world to tell you that I think that we've done an outstanding job in this regard, but I would also ask you a question and say what state has. And so I think this is a very complex issue, and certainly it's not one that I am prepared to lay out a program on tonight.
Panel, I would like to pass along the number to our viewers. You may call, collect, anywhere within the viewing area code 512-474-5071 with your questions for Governor Clements tonight. That's area code 512-474-5071 with your questions for Governor Clements. Bo, you want to continue with another round of questions?
On this welfare, Governor, there's been some suggestion, I believe, that the Reagan administration may come forth at some point with a proposal that welfare responsibilities be taken over by the states. Would you be in favor of that?
No, I wouldn't, Bo. At the last governor's conference in Washington during February, this was discussed at some length. And it's interesting that not a single governor wanted to take those particular programs over. There was only one area in which we felt that the federal government, outside of national security, should have an overriding position. And this had to do with welfare and Medicare, Medicaid, and that sort of thing, where those programs are so huge and where it needs a national thrust that no state really wanted to take those programs on. And we told President Reagan this.
Susan?
Governor, the crime package that you have articulated as a very high priority, if not the most important area for the legislature's attention, doesn't seem to be moving very fast out of committees. And some have speculated that this is just the wiretap, oral confession. Some of these things are just so unpopular that none of these legislators really want to vote for them.
Unpopular with whom?
With people and with some lawmakers.
That's not true. Let me respond first of all to the question by reciting again my poll information. The poll information that I have, my own for instance, but all other polls that I know of, and I know of no one that refutes this, that on those crime bills that you're talking about, and more particularly the one that everyone says is so sensitive, the wiretapping bill, or surveillance as it's called, that on any poll that I know of, the people of Texas favor that by not less than 2/3 and up to about 82%. So there is no question whatsoever about what the people of Texas want. Now, what the legislature will do is quite another issue. But so far as the people of this great state is concerned, the constituency that's out there, let there be no question about what the people of Texas want. They want a bill on surveillance to use only on cases that relate to drugs. So there isn't any question about what our people want in the state. The question is, are we going to be able to get that through the subcommittee, through the committee, on the floor, and get a favorable vote? And I will say to you, and I'll predict tonight, that the answer will be yes, that those bills will come out of committee and that they will pass on the floor, and we will have, in every instance, that crime package, it will be passed. I know of no piece of that crime package that won't pass.
Dave?
Governor, for all intents and purposes, the House of Representatives didn't meet to any large extent for the first 60 days except to consider some matters that you declared emergencies. The pace now, as we pass the midway point, is picking up in the legislature, but if the regular session only lasts for 140 days and should end around the end of May. However, there's an awful lot of things in the still yet to be done, school finance, the appropriations bill, one thing or another, and
sorry about that.
And I'm just curious whether it's going to whether you think there's any possibility the legislature is going to be able to finish all their duties within the regular session, or whether there are going to be one or more special sessions in which you're going to be largely in control because you can dictate what will be considered in the special session.
Dave, it's a very good question, and once again I'll refer to my discussions this morning with Lieutenant Governor Hobby and Speaker Clayton. We're all in accord that there should not be a special session. None of us want a special session, and they are of the opinion that the legislature will do its work and that they will finish these programs that you're talking about and come out in a timely way. And we're all working in that direction, because I don't think the legislature wants a special session, and I certainly don't. So we have this in mind, and both the Speaker and the Lieutenant Governor are of the opinion that these bills and this work that you know must be done, that it is flowing through in a proper manner. These bills are getting the attention that they should, and that they will come out all even at the tail end of the session.
2 years ago, you promised to call a special session if the legislature did not pass initiative and referendum. I think wiretap, and the third one is, I believe, some sort of tax refund. They didn't, and you didn't. Part of the excuse that you used was the fact that Billy Clayton was involved in the Brylab trial, and you thought that the session would be colored by whatever was happening to him, and there would be a speaker's race, and so on. Our INR and the wiretap bill, is that important to you this time, that if they are not passed, you would call a special session?
Dave, that is something that I have not at this point considered. I will again predict that both of those bills will pass. As a matter of fact, I was talking to the leadership about both of those bills today, and I think they'll both pass. I'm not concerned about them.
I think we'll have another quick round of questions from the panel before we get into our viewer calls.
Let's shift over to the loan bill that just passed the House today, which would permit probably basically 24% interest on consumer loans, and more in some instances. You indicated that you were pleased that they'd at least cut it back from 30% to 24%. Do you think that 24% interest is warranted throughout the consumer lending field today in Texas?
No, I don't. And I really think it needs to be said that I am pleased that they have removed some of the lower ceilings, which were unrealistic, and that this 24% will allow the marketplace to work. And I don't anticipate, I certainly don't expect that 24% will in any way become a universal interest charge. I think it will be significantly less than that, and I think the marketplace will work. And I'm pleased to note that the prime in most of the banks, large banks in Texas, is now down to 17%, and the rural banks have never gotten up that high, I think, as you well know. So I think the marketplace is working, and hopefully those interest rates are going to come on down.
I'd like to ask one more question about that. That marketplace phrase has been used a great deal by the proponents of this bill, and the implication of that, Senator Jones, the sponsor of the bill in the Senate, said that he hoped that the ceiling was such that the free marketplace would work, so that the ceiling in effect would be meaningless.
I think that's right.
And well, that's the reason for my question. If that's the case, what's the point in having, one, a usury law, or two, any limits on interest if you're going to rely on the free marketplace?
Bo, I think that that the answer to that is rather simple, and you know the answer. And our Constitution would have to be changed for us not to have a limit, and you know that as well as I do. So 24%, in my judgment, is a number that was just arbitrarily picked out with the hope and the anticipation, really, that the marketplace will work, and that number will, in fact, never be reached. I would have been just as happy if it were 20%. Just some number there that will get us away from the unrealistic number that was heretofore used and that we were obliged to do because of our Constitution. Now, the proper way to do it, really, would be to have a constitutional amendment which would take away the usury laws per se and really let the free marketplace
well, that's
work.
why I asked the question.
But they have seen fit not to do that, and there's a question as to whether it would pass or not. So they've used this as a device to accomplish the same thing.
To circumvent the Constitution.
That's really right. That's what they're doing.
Susan and Dave, we would like to get to the calls right away. We will be returning with more calls from or questions from the panel. Go ahead, please. We're ready for our first viewer call.
Yes, Governor Clements, what is your main objective in education in order to achieve higher pupil competency?
Thank you.
Well, one of our panelists a while ago referred to my crime bill as probably the #1 priority that I have, and I'd like to correct that with this answer to you. If I have a #1 priority, and I really do in this legislative session, it relates to the education bills that we have in the legislature. So, specifically answering your question, I think that we probably have to have a better environment in the classroom. And by that I mean we must have more discipline in the classroom, which will lend itself to a teaching environment. I think that probably would do more than any one single thing. And then you can go on from there and you can talk about the curricula and what is it that you're going to really teach in this classroom. And the Texas public and the Texas constituency has said in no uncertain terms that they want to get back to the basics of reading and writing and arithmetic and also the discipline. They also want the teacher certification to be on a competency basis where they test the teachers prior to certification. I think that teachers' salaries are also an influencing factor here where we can attract better teachers. So this is a whole package, and to pick out just one thing and say what would be that one thing that will contribute more than any other to this whole package of things is difficult to do. But if I had to, I'd say that we need more discipline in the classroom to contribute to a learning environment.
Governor, our next call is on the line. Please go ahead. Go ahead, please.
Governor Clements?
Yes.
I'm a student from here in Austin, and in relation to your agreement with the proposed tuition increase, I just wanted to know, you often precede your proposal about the tuition increase by talking about the fact that you've met with administrators and teachers and regents. I was wondering if you'd be willing to meet with a group of students, university Republicans and Democrats. We're opposing the tuition increase on a bipartisan basis, and if we could get some students from around the state to meet with you, what do you think about that idea?
Well, it would be fun to meet with the students, and I would enjoy meeting with the students. I always do. And I think that if you have followed my travels, you know that I have met with students all across the state, whether it's at El Paso or it's at Arlington or it's in College Station or here in Austin and at various other state institutions. I have yet to find a student, frankly, that wants their tuition increased. So, you know, it's not as though I don't understand where the students are coming from. I understand completely. And I just don't know of any students that want their tuition increased, and I think that's understandable. And it wasn't too long ago when I was a student, and I certainly didn't want my tuition increased. So I'm very sympathetic to your position.
Ready for our next caller? Please go ahead.
Yes, Governor, I'm calling from Austin. I heard you speaking favorably of work programs for AFDC mothers, and I wondered what was wrong with the program that the Department of Human Resources and the community colleges had just gotten started when you vetoed the funding for it in 1979, and how could that program have been changed so that you could now endorse it?
Thank you.
Well, frankly, I don't recall that particular program, and I can't really comment on it. I do know what we're doing now. I do know what we're trying to do through this other program that is reaching out into the private sector and trying to encourage the private sector as much as we can to take that program over. We're trying to fit these mothers, particularly, as I said, 80% of the heads of households are mothers in this instance, and we're trying to train these mothers for particular jobs, and it's been very successful, and I heartily endorse the program.
Thank you. Ready for our next call? Please go ahead.
Governor, this is Richard Avery in Houston, Texas.
property taxes in Burleson County have increased 200% to 300% over the last year. The only explanation I can get is that the legislatures pass a law and there's nothing we can do about it. It's inconceivable to me that any representative would vote for legislation that would bring about these increases, and I'd like to know if you can explain the law that these officials may be referring to.
Thank you.
Did you say increases in accounting?
Both county and school tax.
Oh, county. Well, this is of course a very complex issue, and it's one that I, as a taxpayer, don't understand probably any better than you do. The intention of the pivotal bill, which brought this about, was that there would be a fair and equitable evaluation of the market value of various property in the counties, and this would of course include the cities and the school districts. And then the rate of assessment would be adjusted so that the increase would not, the net increase in the taxes would not be more than 5% in any one year. It has not turned out this way. There's been great resistance to the various taxing entities, the school boards, the cities, and the counties unitizing or pulling together in a one office type of operation, first of all. And then after some of them did pull together, the results have just been horrendous. So I will predict to you that there will be some significant changes in regard to the pivotal bill, and there are several bills pending right now to correct this particular situation. Exactly what's going to come out of the legislature in this regard, I'm not in a position to say at this time. But you're not alone, believe me, in the way that you have reacted to these significant increases in various parts of the state. And our citizens are in what you might call a state of rebellion about this. And I believe that there will be some perfecting legislation that will be passed that will go a long ways towards correcting the situation.
Governor, our next caller is ready with another question. Please go ahead.
This is John Rowland of San Antonio. Governor, what is your present attitude toward the University of Texas at San Antonio receiving a large enough share of the permanent university fund to enable it to become the kind of postgraduate institution that San Antonio needs to meet the needs of its people and attract high technology industry?
Thank you.
I think I can best answer that by again saying to you that in this legislature, after many, many years of discussion, I think that you will find that there will be a bill passed, and I will sign it, that will take the permanent university fund, the so-called PUF fund, and will make that available to all of the institutions within the University of Texas system and the A&M system. It will also increase the bonding capability from 20% to 30% in that system, so that all of the schools within those two systems will share in the PUF fund. At the same time, and as a part of the same bill, and this will be a constitutional amendment. It'll have to be on the ballot where the people of Texas will vote on it. At the same time, there will be a piece of that bill that will correct the Wichita Falls Midwestern University suit that was claiming that doing away with the ad valorem tax to a small 1/100th of 1% was unconstitutional. They will drop that suit, and we will forgive the 2 years that the ad valorem tax was not collected. We'll forgive that as a form of tax relief. And this constitutional amendment will then reinstitute in the ad valorem tax a 3-cent levy for a period of 10 years, or to the accumulation of $2 billion, whichever is the soonest. from this sum, this 3 cents. And this will be used by all of the other state institutions in establishing a permanent endowment fund for those institutions. Now, this is a long answer to your question. It's highly complex, but I suspect and I believe that after the legislation is finished and I sign it, that the University of Texas at San Antonio will then fully participate in the Permanent University Fund through this bill.
We're ready for our next call. Please go ahead.
Yes, Governor, I'm calling from Waco. I'd like to ask you if you could comment on the plight of a retired black family whose mineral-rich property is in jeopardy because of a title dispute with the state of Texas. I'd like to know how this problem is being handled now, and also how has it been handled previously?
Thank you.
Well, first of all, it hasn't been handled previously. That is the problem. As I recall, this family's name is Johnson, and I believe this family has lived on this particular tract for 52 years, if I remember the number correctly. I think that they will have a correction take place legislatively. They're talking about several options. They're talking in terms of a constitutional amendment that would cure only this particular piece. They're also talking about a constitutional amendment that would allow the land commissioner, Mr. Armstrong, to consider these kinds of cases on a case-by-case basis and, where justified, make correction. And then there's another option that has been discussed that has a 99-year lease aspect to it, where the land office would actually make a lease to this person for 99 years, which is practically the equivalent of ownership. So I think something should be done. I have publicly said so. I think an injustice exists here. I think that this person has certainly demonstrated constancy of farming this piece of property for 52 years, and I'm confident that a corrective action will be taken.
We're ready for the next caller. Please go ahead.
Hi, Governor. I'm Rudy Stefanczyk, and I'm a medical student from Galveston, Texas. And I'm one student, believe it or not, who can understand a need for an increase in tuition in Texas.
Good for you.
Governor, why are you proposing that medical school tuition be increased 900% from $400 to $3,600 per year when you are only for a doubling of undergrad tuition? Do you feel that effectively doubling the debt a med student has when he graduates will decrease his willingness to go into the lower-paying areas of primary care, which this state really needs?
Thank you.
I felt like that your favorable response was going to be short-lived. I just had that feeling when you started. Let me try to put into focus for you the background with regard to the much higher increase for medical students. The cost of educating medical students in the state medical schools has been carefully audited. It's been audited by the medical schools in different cases, different schools, different audits. It's been audited by the coordinating board. It's been audited by the university systems. None of these types of audit are in any disagreement, basically, significantly. It cost approximately $300,000 to educate every medical student that is graduated from the Texas system. $300,000 each. That's a 7-year course, 4 years in school and 3 years residency. Under these circumstances, it was believed, and I concur, that tuition needed to be significantly increased. It's even been talked about that there should be an obligation of those medical students to work for the state or to be assigned to particular areas that are in need of doctors, because there is some some rather strong feeling that $300,000 per student is much too much to invest in a person without any kind of a payback circumstance.
Thank you. Ready for our next question? Please go ahead.
Governor, my name is Jose Camacho. I'm from Austin, Texas. On Wednesday, the House passed a child labor bill that would update our 100-year-old child labor laws here in Texas. The law, however, allows children of all ages to work in the agricultural industry, except when they're supposed to be at school. I was wondering what your position on child labor in agriculture is.
Well, again, this is a very difficult and complex area, and we in Texas have a long history of children working in agriculture. This is a part of the traditional rural pattern of Texas. I am in favor of this bill. I will sign the bill. I'm not sure that we have all the answers in regard to children in agriculture, and certainly those children need to be properly educated. And I think that you will find that fewer and fewer children are being kept out of school working in agriculture. I know in the past that has been not the case, but we have really turned in Texas during the last 30 or 40 years from what was formerly termed a rural society to an urban society. We've had a great reduction in the so-called family farm. These farms are now large commercial enterprises. In most instances, these big farms have several thousand acres in them, and there is not much child labor involved in this kind of an operation. It's mostly mechanical, as you well know. So as the numbers of family farms have greatly diminished, the abuses of child labor or child work on the family farm has also gone down significantly. So I don't think this is the problem that it used to be.
Governor, we have time for just a few more calls, and one is on the line right now. Please go ahead.
Governor Clements, yes. My name is Mark Solomon, and I'm in Austin right now. I need to know your opinion on Senate Bill 306, the one to raise the drinking age to 19.
I'm for it.
Okay, I'm currently 18, though, and I'll be 19 after September 1st.
Hold your breath, and you'll soon be 19.
Yeah, I know, but still, it's like taking away a right that I've currently got.
Thank you.
I'm for the bill.
Okay, ready with the next call. Go ahead, please. You're online. Go ahead, please.
Hello, Governor. This is Chuck Williams in Fort O'Connor, Texas.
Yes, sir.
And about a year ago, you were going to do something or try to do something statewide through the Attorney General's office about the windfall profit tax. And I'm wondering if you've ever been able to do anything. As you know, many Texans have really suffered with this bill, and can the state help us get some relief? Thank you.
We have joined some other states in a suit to declare the windfall profits tax unconstitutional, and this is moving through the courts, and our Attorney General is represented in this suit representing Texas, and I would not be able to forecast when the Supreme Court will hear this petition. I have no way really of knowing, but it is moving forward, and we are a party to that suit.
Okay, ready for our next question. Please go ahead.
Governor Clements, my name is Sheila Nixon from Commerce, Texas, and regarding House Bill 197 on compulsory liability insurance for motor vehicles, I was curious, in view of the fact that it's going to increase the number of state employees by 61 people, what your opinion was.
Thank you.
I have not seen this bill, and I do not know the particulars of the bill. I have not heard this number of increasing state employees before. That's new to me. But I have to say that I am in favor of some form of protection to our citizens in Texas with respect to automobile liability. I have heard discussed at great length the theory of no-fault liability. I've also heard the case made and argued about in regard to everyone having to have liability insurance. I don't know what the answer is. There's great disagreement about all this. But I don't like the way the situation is at the moment, and I certainly do think there should be protection to our citizens where people are answerable to this exposure and to this liability.
Governor, time's just about out. We do have time for one more call. Please go ahead.
Governor Clements, my name is Don Laird. I'm from Austin, Texas, and I'm a state employee. I've been a state employee for 7 years now. There's a mandatory deduction of 6% of my salary each month. This money is sent to the employee's retirement system. The employee's retirement system credits my account with 5% interest. Now, after 7 years of state employment, I have $10,000 on deposit with the employee's retirement system. And that 5% interest I receive is only about $500 each year.
Can we have your question, please?
Well, yes, sir. My money market funds pay 15%, and I want to know if it's fair to the long-term career employee who is one of the 14 employees of 15 who never received retirement benefits to receive only 5% interest on that mandatory deposit.
Thank you.
It's an interesting question. I am not familiar with the details, and I will look into this and see what might be done about it. I cannot answer the question. I think that there should be some kind of a floating rate that would follow the prime rate or government bonds and give a higher return, but I'll have to look at it and see.
Thanks, Governor. And thank you for all of the calls from across the state for Governor Clements tonight. Panel, we're going to return. Susan, we pick up with you, please.
Yes, Governor, the Democrats have started to have lunch together, and they're probably plotting against you, but more germane, my question is, they're having problems with where they're going to have lunch, and in fact, their first choice for their first meeting, reportedly, was the Quorum Club at the Driscoll Hotel. That is being boycotted by 11 female lawmakers because one female lawmaker was not allowed to be served there when she came in for a business meal. How do you feel about that? Are you patronizing the Quorum Club yourself?
No, and I really think that club has another
Two
name.
different
The
names.
Quorum Club is not in the Driscoll Hotel.
No, it's not in the Driscoll.
Is it at the Driscoll?
There is a club there, but
I think you're talking about the
reports that I have seen. Oh, it's the Citadel Club.
I think
I'm
it's the
very
Citadel
sorry.
Club.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, the one. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I apologize to the Quorum Club, but are you also boycotting this club, which has excluded female lawmakers?
Well, you know, I can't hardly boycott something where I've never been and I'm not a member, and so I've never been in this club, and I don't know what those circumstances are. But it's too bad that the women couldn't get in. You know, I'd think the club would want some women in it, wouldn't you?
Dave?
Governor Mark White, who is the Attorney General, has his latest solution to the suits, the prison suit, the Ruiz versus Estelle suit, the bilingual education suit, and some others, is to call on Ronald Reagan and the Justice Department and William French Smith, the new Attorney General at the U.S. level, to essentially fire their attorneys in the Civil Rights Division that have been bringing these cases. That Mark White says that through 4 presidential administrations now that you've had the same people in the Justice Department, the same attorneys on these cases. What's your reaction to that?
Well, my basic reaction is that it's strange to me that in the prior 2 years when Mr. Carter, as a fellow Democrat, was in office, I didn't hear him making any of these noises. And these same people, of course, were handling the cases at that time, and in a good many instances, these cases originated under Mr. Carter's administration and these attorneys. So if he feels all that strongly about it, I wonder why he wasn't saying anything earlier.
Given that, do you think that that Ronald Reagan and William French Smith should should lessen the Justice Department's efforts in these areas?
I think, Dave, that it's interesting and should be in the record that I have talked to Attorney General Smith personally. I did this at the request of our Attorney General. I have done all that I know how to do to pull him back from these cases, because I think that the Justice Department is on the wrong side of these issues, and I sincerely believe that. So whatever little influence that I have, I'm trying to prevail upon them to pull back from these cases, and in any event allow us more time to better prepare ourselves in the instance of several of these cases. So if the Attorney General will fire and terminate these lawyers that are so vigorous in pursuing against Texas, nothing would please me more. And perhaps that's exactly what should happen, and hopefully our Attorney General will have some influence on that.
Governor, panel, our time has run out. I'd like to thank you all for being with us tonight, and also to our viewing audience, again, for the questions for Governor Clements on tonight's program. Bo Byers from the Houston Chronicle, thank you very much. Susan Wright, public television station KUHT in Houston. Dave McNeely from the Austin American-Statesman for being with us. Thank you and good evening.
The Governor's Report is produced live and distributed by satellite to the public television and radio stations in Texas and to the affiliates of the Texas State Network. Join us again next month when the Governor's Report will air on Thursday, April 23rd. Check local listings for the Governor's Report.
Statewide distribution of the Governor's Report is made possible by grants from American Steel Building Company, Incorporated, Boring and Tunneling Company of America, Incorporated, and Perry Homes of Houston.
What is the position of the United States as a world leader? Join Bill Moyers on KLRN, KLRU when he welcomes renowned French journalist Raymond Aron. Aron views this issue positively, seeing America as the world power most capable of preserving world liberty. Bill Moyers Journal, Friday, March 27th at 8 p.m. on channels 9 and 18.
Popular events in public television, it's almost time for the other, the Great TV Auction. Now is the time to donate items such as these to the go-getters when they come around for your tax-deductible contributions. If you'd like to find out more about what you can do to help promote your product and support your local public television station, call 476-5566 in Austin or 222-8041 in San Antonio. Contribute to one so we can keep bringing you the other.
This is KLRN San Antonio and KLRU Austin.
American Statesman. Oh, and thanks for making Info Center a success. Info Guide inside Sunday's newspaper. Be sure to save it.
If you've been looking for something to sleep on at a price that won't keep you awake all night, now's the time, and Lax is the place. Right now, Lax's entire stock of bedding's on sale. Choose from Bassett, Englander, or Sealy, and save. Or if you want something to sleep on at night and sit on during the day, look at this Herculon upholstered queen-size sleeper sectional. Both pieces only $5.99. Save on every other sofa sleeper in stock, too. But hurry, because this sale ends March 31st. Sleep tight and save a bunch right now at Lax.
Bob Binder.
Has this mayor's growth management been anything more than a hollow campaign slogan? Has it helped preserve our environment or our quality of life? Is it easier to get through traffic? Has it meant lower electric bills? Has it meant reasonable property taxes? Are you getting your money's worth from your city government? Is city government genuinely concerned about you?
Vote for Austin. Bob Binder, Mayor.
This is KTVV TV 36 in Austin. This is the 10 o'clock edition of News Center 36.
Good evening and welcome. I'm Jessica F.
And I'm John David Powell. In the news tonight, there have been some major developments in the Elaine McQuistion kidnap murder case. This afternoon, 4 murder indictments were returned by a Travis County grand jury, and charges were dropped against one of the suspects. Now, those indicted were Faustino Gonzalez, Ruben Teo, and Nemesio Carmona, all 17, and 18-year-old Joe Robert Riojas. All 4 men are from Austin. Because of lack of evidence, the district attorney's office dropped charges against Adolph Martinez. Elaine McQuistion was abducted last June, and her body was later found in McLennan County. She had also been raped. Riojas was arrested yesterday at his home at 200 East Longspur Boulevard. He had been mentioned by prosecutors and defense lawyers as a possible suspect or as having knowledge of the case about the time of the November 23rd arrest of Gonzalez, Teo, and Carmona. All 4 are being held on bond, and trial for Gonzalez, Teo, and Carmona has been set for April the 27th.
Austin will be visited next week by some VIPs, namely Vice President Bush and former President Jimmy Carter and his wife Rosalind. The Carters will be guests of Lady Bird Johnson at the LBJ Ranch Wednesday, and then will visit Austin for a tour of the LBJ Library Thursday. Vice President is due in town Monday afternoon for a private meeting with Governor Clements and a speech to a joint session of the legislature. Governor Bill Clements today warned legislators to be careful with the next biennium's budget, since federal monies to the state are going to be cut by $2.5 billion. Clements says Texans have to shave off that money and cut the anticipated budget increase from 20% to 10%.
A bill designed to raise the state's legal drinking age to 19 hit a major snag in the House of Representatives today. Lawmakers refused to accept a compromise worked out by a House-Senate Conference committee earlier this week. The problem centers around a House amendment saying a liquor retailer would be presumed to have knowingly sold alcohol to a minor if he failed to ask for a driver's license or other proof of age. In other action, the House gave final passage to a bill setting the maximum interest rate ceiling at 24%. The Senate still has to act on that bill.
Coming up on the News Center, Jim Giles updates his weekend weather prognostication.
And Glenn Klaus reports on an award for former Ambassador Ann Armstrong.
If you're thinking about radial tires, get going. Get value. Get Michelin.
At Michelin, we put you first with radials you can count on.
And my Michelin tires are priced about the same as other leading radials.
That's right. Michelin didn't get to be the fastest growing tire company in America by making a tire people can't afford.
At Walker Tire Company, you can get a Michelin 205 14X white wall for only $77.50, $251 FET with exchange. Walker Tire Company, Austin's family-owned Michelin dealer.
When I was wounded in Vietnam, my football career seemed over, but I overcame my handicap. With training and practice, the mentally retarded can overcome their handicaps too. I'm Rocky Blyer. With your help, thousands of special people can experience the joy of sports through Special Olympics. For each Roman Meal Bakery product you buy, 5 cents is donated to Special Olympics. Help your local Roman Meal baker help them. Buy split-top bread in the Roman Meal section of your favorite store.
Springtime is fun and an exciting time for the fashion-minded. And just for the ladies, Griffin's has a special group of feather hat bands and accessories. Now 30% off. Ladies will walk among the flowers in Minnetonka moccasins, also 30% off. And we can't forget the men who will enjoy the springtime in these Levi blue denim jeans, now only $14.99. Start fresh and new with a Western wear outfit from Griffin's, the home-owned and family-operated Western store, 503 East Seacage Road and 9308 North Lamar. And Jim Giles is now here with a look at the weather, and things look pretty good.
Look pretty good. Tomorrow's going to be a nice day. We have some rain on the horizon, and I should tell John David he better hold that wig on tight tomorrow. I'm only kidding. It's going to be windy, though, tomorrow. It's going to be downright windy, south and southwesterly winds up to probably 25, 30 miles an hour. So get ready. It's going to be windy for the next day or two, and we have a pretty good chance of rain before this weekend is over. Let me show you the way the temperatures ran today. It was a nice day indeed. 57 degrees was our morning low, 78 wonderful degrees this afternoon for a high, very pleasant day. Tomorrow should be very similar. Early morning low will be just a shade warmer. We shall have some early morning cloudiness, I believe, in the area. Let's take a look at the satellite picture. It all is shown on the satellite. First of all, the midsection of the U.S. looks fairly good. We can see some cloudiness moving across parts of the Midwest and the Great Lakes area. An upper-level storm impulse moving through that area, producing some rain. Out to the west, though, is the real story. Notice some heavy cloudiness moving into the Rockies, also some cloudiness moving into the high plateau area. Rather disorganized storm system right now, but it's going to be a major storm. It's already produced quite a bit of snow, higher elevations, and pretty decent rains at lower elevations. This is bothersome, the little clearing between the two storm masses. This one will move through on Saturday. We might get just a brief clearing, though, before then another cloud mass moves through late on Saturday or Saturday night into Sunday. So the weekend forecast, a little bit uncertain specifically, but in general it's fairly certain, a decent chance of rain. Let's take a look at the national picture. We can see the storm out to the west. Rain, snow at higher elevations. Austin, Nevada, 3 inches of snow. That was reported early this morning. I've had no additional reports this afternoon. California, Sierra Nevadas, up to 2 feet of snow at higher elevations. 3 and 4 inches of rain in some of the valleys in northern California, and that over the past couple days as that storm system moved through. Very windy in the southwest. In the mountains, gusts 40, 45, even 50 miles per hour. So there's travelers' advisories for that part of the nation as well. Travelers' advisories for much of the mountainous west because of heavy snows. On through the midsection of the nation, the weather looks very good indeed. Presidio 89, hot spot for the state and nation. The southeast generally fair, a little bit of rain in the Midwest and the Great Lakes area. 12 degrees, Holton, Maine, early this morning. The jet stream now, we can see a southwesterly jet, a significant jet, over the southwestern part of the United States. That'll be drifting our way in the next 2 days. Otherwise, pretty good weather over the nation. Currently, out at the airport, they're reporting clear skies, a temperature on the hour of 64 degrees, 58 dew point, and 81% our relative humidity, barometer rising from 30.03 inches of mercury, wind south, 18 miles per hour. Rain, none during the past 24 hours, almost 3/4 of an inch behind our rainfall for Austin. On the Texas map, fair and mild over virtually the entire state, some partly cloudy conditions in the Panhandle, very windy out to the west, and a dust storm warning for tomorrow for those folks out across the western part of the state. If you're moving that way, get ready for that dust. 29 degrees at Martha this morning. Again, Presidio 89 degrees. No precipitation reported across the state right now, but certainly expect some in the next 12 to 24 hours moving from west to east across the state. Radar showing nothing. Let's go to the forecast for Austin and Central Texas. Fair early tonight, but lots of early morning low clouds, and with that, always a chance of drizzle and fog. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy, warm, but windy. Windy, do you hear that, John David? I hear you. And it looks like winds about 6 to 12 tonight, 25 miles per hour tomorrow afternoon. Early morning low 61, 78 good degrees tomorrow afternoon for a high. Should be a pleasant day all in all. Saturday and Sunday, considerable cloudiness and chance of showers and thunderstorms continuing through the weekend. Monday and Tuesday, the storm should be by. Fair and mild coming up early next week. So, increasing chances of rain as we move into late tomorrow and into tomorrow night, then a chance of rain on through the weekend.
That's good. We can use it.
We could. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Jim. Still ahead on the News Center, city candidates lash out at their opponents.
And the county tax assessor collector gives a warning to taxpayers.
We have a big answer to all those large size problems at Salesman Samples Enlarged Big and Tall Men's Store. Thousands of short sleeve and long sleeve shirts in large and tall sizes. Enrow Featherlock knit shirts now on sale at $14.90 to $15.80. Enrow and Arrow dress shirts in solid stripes and button downs now $13.20 to $16.50. Sansabelt and John Alexander slacks super sale priced at $18 to $35. Also, designer jeans and colorful short sleeve Spire and Enrow Better sport shirts. Salesman Samples for big sizes and big savings.
If your vacuum cleaner doesn't seem to be working quite as well as it used to, then it's time to bring it into Austin Vacuum. The friendly people, the fast service, have been a tradition at Austin Vacuum for 30 years. Now, if it's a new vacuum you need, you won't find any high-pressure salespeople working on commission. You'll just find the right vacuum for your cleaning needs at a price you can't afford.
If you're looking for a better way to clean up your floor, shop at Austin Vacuum, Austin's friendliest stores.
Excuse me, sir. Is this the 1981 Home Product Show?
Yep.
Where are the double-barrel ratcheted saw drivers?
What?
Someone said by the window displays.
Go over by the new kitchen appliances, past the ceiling fans, the hot tubs, the patio furniture, but before the fireplaces.
Yeah. What are you doing here?
Just putting the finishing touches on this dandy life-size playhouse. It's a door prize here. You can register to win it by the door.
Where's the door?
Don't miss the big 1981 Home Product Show in Municipal Auditorium.
The Travis County tax assessor collector is having a difficult time contacting some taxpayers not yet on the tax roll. David Noriega reports that those persons could eventually lose their property.
Tax assessor collector Bill Alshire says many taxpayers don't receive their tax notices because no valid mailing address is available to his office. So second notices are being mailed, and Alshire is asking property owners who do not receive notices in 2 weeks to contact his office to straighten out the records.
The consequences of failing to do this could be that they will fail to get their notice, they will fail to get a tax bill from us this year, the taxes could go unpaid, and if the taxes are not paid, finally the property could be confiscated and sold at public auction, and they would lose ownership of that property. If property is not rendered to this tax office by April the 15th, it goes on the tax roll anyway. It goes on at whatever value we can determine it should be on there with, and that's without being able to consult the taxpayer.
On another topic, Alshire says to call his office if you don't have a voter registration card for the April 4th elections, but are registered.
Anyone who has registered to vote before the deadline of March the 5th and has not yet received a voter registration certificate, or at least doesn't receive it by next Monday, should contact this office, and it's especially important to contact us early in the week so that we can get their voter registration certificate to them if they were qualified to vote, and so that they can vote next Saturday's election, or a week from Saturday's election.
David Noriega, News Center 36.
City elections are less than 2 weeks away, and candidates are busy with last-minute news conferences and trying to campaign as much as possible before Election Day. Michael Kastner reports today was no exception.
$1,000 for the mayor's re-election campaign.
His gang from robbing the people of Texas.
He makes a lot of false statements, and
April 4th is getting near, and as was evident at several press conferences today, campaign tactics are taking on a tough edge. A comment made by Place One candidate Bob Duke was the subject of one press conference today. Duke had stated no special interest group should be able to buy a city council seat.
He is a special interest. He's the chief lobbyist for the Texas Consumer Finance Association, which is among the greediest lobbyists that operate, among the greediest lobbies that operate in the state of Texas.
Duke shot back, saying his business as a lobbyist has nothing to do with the elections and should not be a topic of discussion. Mayor McClellan's voting record on growth and the Barton Creek issue were the topic of mayoral candidate Bob Binder's gathering today, and he said, quote, "The mayor's developer friends are financing over half the money she has raised for her campaign."
I'm pleased and proud to have broad-based support from all segments of this community, and nobody buys my vote at any price.
Larry Deucer, candidate for Place One on the council, again today brought up his cost and production overruns for the South Texas nuclear project. And in response, Houston Power and Light Company stated last week there's not enough data gathered to estimate overruns, and there won't be until June. And between now and Election Day, voters can expect even more get-tough campaign tactics from the candidates. Michael Kastner, News Center 36.
When voter goes to the poll April the 4th, besides voting for mayoral and city council candidates, they will also vote on whether or not to grant the Austin Community College a governing board of directors and on a $76 million bond issue for construction of new facilities. Representatives from both sides addressed those issues today.
The vote is critical for the community college. I can't really emphasize how important it is, and I speak to you on behalf of the faculty, the students, the staff, and others who are concerned that we provide the very best education that we can, and particularly emphasis on the occupational, vocational courses that are needed for Austin as we move through the 1980s and the 1990s.
Several $1 million available to them in the form of surplus and reserves to make the basic repairs that are necessary, to raise salaries, and if that money's not there, then we also have a discussion about that. But we think that there is another approach. We do not want to shut the college down. We think there is room for it. However, we do not think there's room in the taxpayer's pocketbook for any more taxes to be paid.
Their appearance was on today's Joyce and Mel show here on TV 36.
The Austin City Council today set rates for the proposed park and ride bus service for North and South Austin. The new routes will offer service for 70 cents one way or $23 per month on a pass. As a kickoff to the 15th annual Texas Legislative Conference being held in New Braunfels, Ann Armstrong, former ambassador to Great Britain, was honored this evening as Texan of the Year. Reporter Glenn Klaus went to New Braunfels and has this report.
The Texan of the Year award is given for outstanding service benefiting the state of Texas in the field of public affairs. And this year's recipient of the award, Ann Armstrong, was recognized tonight by Texans for the many contributions she has made to Texas and to the nation. Former Watergate prosecutor and Houston attorney Leon Jaworski presented Armstrong with the award during a reception and ceremony held at the Civic Center in New Braunfels. Armstrong told the News Center that she was very elated and honored to be only the second woman ever chosen, along with Lady Bird Johnson, for this prestigious award.
One reason I'm proud to be here tonight is because I think politics is a wonderful word. I've never thought of it as a bad word. Yes, as long as I draw breath, I'm going to be interested in politics.
Glenn Klaus, News Center 36.
Steve Fallon is coming up on the News Center with an update on the NCAA swim meet.
And we'll have a report on a resumption of picketing at the airport.
Plants and plant-related crafts at the Plant Show this Saturday and Sunday in Municipal Auditorium. It's big, it's wonderful, it's a Sammy show.
The more our family does together, the more we seem to rely on Jack Brown cleaners.
It's so very satisfying to know they'll give everything they do for us that extra bit of care. Jack Brown people take pride in doing things right, whether it's cleaning our drapes and upholstery or delivering our laundry and cleaning right to the front door.
And when we're together for special occasions, we count on Jack Brown's help to look our best.
Thanks, Jack Brown.
Jack Brown, Jack Brown, the best cleaners in town. Jack Brown, Jack Brown, the best.
The Bug Corner?
No, it's not the local tavern for beetles. For complete VW repair work, visit the Bug Corner, 1509 North Street.
The Professional Air Traffic Controllers Organization, that's PATCO, resumed informational picketing today in front of Robert Mueller Airport. Jimmy Bearden, the president of Austin's Local 361, says he'll be going to Washington on April 1st to meet with Congressman Jake Pickle. He says he'll be going along with PATCO representatives from every congressional district in the country. He says although PATCO is not prepared to negotiate indefinitely, as long as the Federal Aviation Administration negotiates in good faith, he's optimistic about getting better working conditions for air traffic controllers. Steve Fallon, was a big day for the NC2A swim and diving meet today.
It certainly was, and tonight they had the finals in some of the events, John David, and the favored Texas Longhorns lived up to expectations with several fine performances. We have a report on some of tonight's action from Steve Mark.
The first round drama began right at the start. UCLA's Brian Goodell tried for 4 NCAA titles in the 500 freestyle. It looked like he'd do it at the outset, leading with half of the race to go. But Arizona's Doug Town emerged in the final laps to win it. Goodell had to settle for 5th. Then the 200 individual medley showdown between Scott Spann of Texas and Bill Barrett of UCLA. Barrett broke the NCAA record this afternoon and did it again tonight. 145.01, beating Spann by almost 2 seconds as UCLA looked like it was in the driver's seat. But Texas got revenge in the next race. The Longhorns' Chris Kirshner winning the 50, 19.67, despite a tough challenge from Auburn's Rowdy Gaines and UCLA's Robin Leamy.
It was really exciting when people just started cheering a lot. I get excited when a lot of people cheer for me, and I'm sure the other guys on our team like it too. It has an advantage, I think. If we could hold on and try to win this meet as a team, that'll be even better.
But the Longhorns cheered some more. Texas setting a new NCAA record in the 400 relay, 3 minutes, 12.93, capping off the first round with Texas leading UCLA by just 2 points. Steve Mark reporting for News Center 36.
The Associated Press ran a report out of Austin today saying the 3 Texas Longhorn basketball starters are among 2,100 people who have signed a petition to adopt a shot clock in the Southwest Conference next year. The 3 Longhorns were LaSalle Thompson, Fred Carson, and Ken Montgomery. I talked to LaSalle today, and he said yes, it was true that he, Ken, and Freddie did sign, but that they were on their way to one of the Midwest regional games at the Superdome, and they did it all in fun. In any event, LaSalle did say he would like to see a shot clock in the Southwest Conference. It would speed up play. Well, many Longhorn fans seem to think that Eddie Sutton of Arkansas is one of the main opponents of a shot clock, but that isn't necessarily true.
There are a lot of us that would be in favor of a timing device. Let's say you take it off the last 2 minutes. If you play a team for 38 minutes and you have a lead, then you certainly should be given the opportunity to go to your control game.
There's a member of the Texas Longhorn men's track team that has done surprisingly well this year. We'll have that story when we return.
Trucks.
Capital's got them.
Chevy trucks.
Big selections, low prices, financing available. Come get your truck. Capital.
Capital.
Capital Chevrolet. Where Austin's dealing today.
Just listen to what people are saying about the amazing Niagara bed.
The quality of my sleep is really important. And that's exactly why I got my Niagara adjustable bed.
I just touch this button and the Niagara bed adjusts for reading.
It's great for watching TV.
Or reading a pizza.
And boy, does it help to relieve strain and tension.
This completely adjustable Niagara bed and its cyclo-massage units are terrific.
Oh, I think the Niagara bed is wonderful.
1/3 of your life is spent in bed. Enjoy it. Find out how you can read, eat, and watch TV in comfort. Discover how patented cyclo-massage units help ease away minor tension, aches, and pain. Now relax totally, sleep soundly, and awaken marvelously refreshed. Get free details by mail about this miracle of science. Call 800-528-6050 toll-free for free booklet by mail. Operators are standing by, so call 800-528-6050 toll-free. Call 800-528-6050.
Yes, it's true. The Longhorn General Store has the largest selection of felt hats in Austin, but that probably won't be true after this week because Longhorn is having an unbelievable sale. Over 3,000 felt hats are reduced 25%. That's 25% off the entire stock. The best name brands in the business, like Stetson, Resistol, Miller, American, and Langenberg. 25% off all colors and sizes, and you still get custom shaping free at Longhorn General Store, North Lamar at Koenig.
The loss of white man Oscar Jacobson was supposedly going to be a big blow to the Texas Longhorn track team this year, but so far, shot putter Kelly Brooks has been outstanding in taking up the slack. The junior from Belton is unbeaten now in 4 meets, and he threw his career best of 62 feet, 7 3/4 inches in winning last Saturday's quadrangular meet here in Austin. So, just what did Brooks do during the off-season to improve so much over last year?
Lifted weights a lot, got married.
How did marriage help you?
A lot, it really did.
Okay. Kelly, when you throw the shot, a lot of people rely on strength, others on technique. You're not really that tall or that heavy, so you rely on that technique.
True, very true. It's just got to keep the flight of the shot in one direction, and that's what I work on all the time.
Texas lost Oscar Jacobson last year from the shot put, expected not to do very well in that category this season, yet you have come on very strong. Do you feel like there was a little pressure on you, though, starting this year because you had to replace Oscar?
Oh, sure. There would have been pressure here if he would have been here, too. So, yeah, I would say yes.
And one final thing. They say that your field event guys, like your shot putters, your pole vaulters, high jumpers, are a little bit flaky. Is that true?
Yes. We're a little crazier probably than anybody else, but it comes with the territory.
Tomorrow night, our track spotlight will be on the Blonde Flash, Longhorn sprinter Wayne Johnson. Round 1 of the Heritage Golf Classic was played today at Hilton Head, South Carolina. Last year's Tour Money winner, Tom Watson, has the lead following a 5 under par 66 today. Gil Morgan is alone in second place, just 1 stroke back. Sev Ballesteros, Hale Irwin, and Fuzzy Zeller are at 68. And among a large group 3 shots off the pace are Jerry Pate, Don January, Gibby Gilbert, and Ray Floyd, who's now won 2 tournaments in a row. Round 2 of the Heritage is set for tomorrow. Well, the first annual Dan Pastorini Roast and Celebrity Golf Tournament to benefit muscular dystrophy will be held this weekend. The tournament will be played Saturday with many of pro football's big-name stars competing, such as Earl Campbell, Tony Dorsett, and Bum Phillips. And the Celebrity Roast will be held tomorrow night at the Sheraton Crest Hotel. I've been asked to be one of the roasters tomorrow night, so if I'm not back with you Monday night, you'll know I went too far with my comments.
Sometimes that can happen. Now, also on Saturday will be the start of the NC2A semifinals?
Right, and I hope to be here to see.
All right, and then you're still going with LSU on Monday?
Still going with them.
All right.
Thank you, Steve. Up next on the News Center, a verdict on damages was returned today in the Carol Burnett libel case.
Hey. We're playing your song. KCSW, 10-4 FM.
Long John Silver's seafood platter.
Bring it on, Long John.
Long John Silver's seafood platter. Crisp fish, big shrimp, scallops.
Bring it on, Long John.
Fries, crunchy hush puppies, fresh coleslaw.
Long John Silver's seafood platter.
A great meal at a great price.
Bring it on, Long John.
Everyone's talking about Scotland Yard's fabrics, where your decorating dollar goes twice as far. Scotland Yard's fabrics, 918 West 12th.
It took the jury only 13 hours to arrive at a verdict in the Carol Burnett versus the National Enquirer case, and that verdict resulted in more than $1 million for the entertainer. Dan Blackburn has a report.
Title of court and cause. We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find for the plaintiff, Carol Burnett, and against the defendant, National Enquirer Incorporated.
With that verdict, Carol Burnett's 5-year libel suit against the National Enquirer ended in victory. Burnett said she felt as though she'd been pregnant for 5 years, and the baby is beautiful. The panel awarded Burnett a total of $1.6 million, and she said the tabloid got what it deserved.
They hurt me, and I'm a human being, and they hurt me, and they're paying for it.
Burnett said she will give the money she was awarded to charity. Defense attorney William Masterson called the damage award the equivalent of capital punishment for a corporation and warned of the verdict's possible impact on news reporters.
I think that any reporter looking at this result, I think it can only have a chilling effect on news gathering.
Defense attorney Masterson says he will seek a new trial, and failing that will appeal to a higher court. Because of the special nature of the Enquirer, his prediction that this verdict will have a chilling effect on news reporters is open to some question. Dan Blackburn, NBC News, Los Angeles.
And that's the news. For all of us at the News Center, thank you for watching and have a good night.
This is the
At Weaver's, it's the time to buy. Odds and ends, one-of-a-kind and discontinued items. A tremendous selection of furniture.